Welcome to the Meet Musings podcast, the show where we talk about different issues and disabilities that affect people emotionally, psychologically, physically, and mentally. We discuss health and well-being generally. We are amplifying the voices of people living with disabilities and limitations and breaking the stigmas. Our podcast is available on Podbean, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Breaker, Amazon Podcast, TuneIn and Alexa, Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. We are also available on Listen Note, Radio Public and iHeartRadio. Just search Meet Musings Podcast on any social media platform. Welcome!
Today, my guest is Taqwetta Ware. Born 4 months premature, her mom never told anyone she was pregnant, and her pregnancy was discovered when her mom was giving birth. She then gave up Taqwetta for adoption and told siblings, 2 sisters and a brother, that she died at the hospital. What a great start in life. I'll leave you to tell your story as it is, Taqwetta. Hello and welcome.
My whole life, I knew I was adopted. My adopted mother and father always told me. So I guess as children, when you instill something, you don't have to sit down and talk to them about it. So they always told me as a baby.
Okay.
So it was never a surprise to me. My mother even gave me my adoption records to show me the history of my mother and how many kids she had and her aspirations in life, that sort of thing. So I would read them from time to time growing up, trying to imagine what she was like. It said she wanted to be a singer, a professional singer. It was funny because I remember one time I used to think, maybe she's Patti LaBelle. So when I met her, she was very hesitant to meet me.
What was your reaction when you met her?
When I met her, she was crying so hard. She was apologizing, and I believe she might have been apologizing because she felt like I was angry that she gave me up, and that was never the case.
Were you angry that she left you?
I was only crying because I finally saw somebody that I looked like. I finally saw a connection.
Okay.
And she was like, oh, I'm going to hate telling your brothers and sisters. And I didn't understand. I didn't even ask her why. I was just too in tune trying to figure out who I was, where I came from, who she was, that type of thing. And then a few weeks later, my sister calls me on the phone and says, she told us that you died. We didn't even know she was pregnant. We go to the hospital. They said she's having a baby. And we had to lie. One of my brothers had to lie and act like he was the father because they wouldn't let anybody in just so he could see me and hold me. And they go home. My sister said they go home and they prep the house for me. And she comes home empty-handed. And she was like, I had passed away. I died at the hospital. And that the hospital was going to bury me, that she didn't have to have that burden on her. And according to my sister, it just started a chain of events.
That must have been really devastating and shocking for you.
As far as psychologically with my siblings. To me. And when you're adopted, it's funny. And I'm talking about myself. I can't speak for all adopted children. But when you're adopted, I would always be like, if the person that I had the deepest connection to, my mother, the woman pregnant with me, the woman who almost died giving birth to me, can walk away, then I've never expected anyone else in my life to stay. And if they left, it wouldn't bother me because that person walked away. And that thought process bleeds onto relationships and family members and friends. So, being that I'm wounded in that sense, mentally, as far as being left at a hospital, you get friends or when you get in relationships, anytime you're wounded and someone tries to heal you or fix you or help you get to the next step of getting healed, they're going to get some of that blood on them. So I noticed that I bleed on every relationship in my life. My husband, my child, my friends, my family, coworkers, bosses. And so that's a part of myself that I'm working on now.
Okay.
Trying to make sure that I don't bleed on them because it wasn't their fight. You know what I mean? It's not their job to fix me, that I need to do it myself.
Absolutely. A mother is supposed to be the one who cares for you, who nurtures you, who protects you, who loves you through thick and thin. And when that mother is the one who abandons you, you feel such pain, such emotions go through your mind, and you just don't understand how to relate with other people when that gap is there and it needs to be filled. And then you get angry and you take out your anger on the next available person. I quite understand how difficult that must have been for you.
So that's the reason why I bet you feel angry.
I wouldn't say it was anger. I just felt like as children, when you're born and you have a parent, that parent, no matter what your spiritual foundation is, Christian, Islam, Judaism, anything, you will always recognize your parent as a God, because when you cry, they make you, they fix it. When you're hungry, they feed you, that sort of thing. So that's instilled in us. That's natural. So they will be God until you learn about whoever, the supreme being is in your environment, in your world.
Yeah.
So, and it never goes away. Even after learning it, it never goes away. So when you're born and your mother, that's the first person you see outside of the doctor. That's the person that holds you. And that's the person you have a mental connection to, a spiritual connection to, a genetic connection to. So whatever she's thought, whatever she has eaten, whatever she's feeling, it's embedded in your DNA. And, DNA is an information center. So anything that she goes through while she's pregnant with you is embedded in you. So I think in a natural sense, maybe unnatural, but in a natural sense to me, it was like that connection was broken. And the deepest connection that I've ever had in my life wasn't, followed through with. I wasn't important enough for her to stay. And you can't have a deeper connection than a mother and a child. Yeah. So in my head, I was just like, if she could walk away, there's nothing in this world that will make anybody else have to stay. If she could walk away.
Oh, that's true. That's true. What was your relationship with your adoptive parents? What was that like?
Oh, it was great. I mean, my mom, she was my best friend. She was my defender, my protector. She was my teacher, everything. She was such a strong woman. Her mother died when she was like 9 or 10. So she grew up pretty hard with her aunts, who were pretty rough on her. But with me, she was very gentle. When she needed to be hard, she was hard, but she always balanced it out with, I support you, I love you, I believe in you, you got this. I'll never turn my back on you type relationship. My father, on the other hand, he grew up very rough and went to Vietnam. And later, we found out he had PTSD. So it would explain the way he and I were. We had a very rocky, rough, we didn't have that father-daughter relationship. Oh, this is my baby. We didn't have that. It was one of those situations where he treated me like an adult. Like my dad would wake me up in the middle of the night and be like, oh, I can't pay the rent, or I don't know if the lights are going to be on. And I'm like 8 or 9, going to school, worried about rent getting paid and worried about lights and worried about food. And he wasn't a supporter. He wasn't like, I love you, you're pretty. My dad grew up. It's funny because my dad has a name that doesn't give you a nickname. His name was Clarence, but people called him Bobby. So I was like, Dad, why do they call you Bobby? And it was because he was so dark when he was born. They thought he was blue, like a bluish color. Okay. So the family would call him Boy Blue, and they just shortened it to Bobby. So because he grew up with this thing that made him feel like he was ugly, because nobody instilled in him that he was handsome or he was a good dude, he would always call himself ugly. So he'd be like, I'm ugly. He would call himself, he would talk, he was ugly, and then say how I look just like. He once told me, not once, but I remember the first time he told me that when the social worker called and said that they had a baby for him, because my mother couldn't have children and they had adopted a child, and 3 months in, the mother came and took him back. So when they put in for another one and they called and said I was available, I was in foster care. He said, when I saw you, you were just so black. I didn't think I wanted you. He was like, I didn't want you. You were just so dark. And then I was just like, dang, so you already have it in your head that your mother didn't want you. Then you find out your daddy didn't want you. So the only like cheerleader I had growing up was my mother. I mean, my father was like, he was a professional victim. And what I mean by that is like, if you said that the sky was blue and he said, no, it's pretty cloudy. And you go, no, look at it. The sky is blue. My dad would say, oh, well, then I guess I'm stupid. So I'm stupid then, instead of saying, okay, we disagree, so that's how I grew up. So I grew up fearing confrontation. I grew up fearing disappointing someone or making someone feel bad. So I would go out of my way, even in detriment to myself, to make other people feel good.
So that's down to the way your dad made you feel. You felt emotionally insecure. And that's coupled with the fact that you already had issues from being abandoned by your birth mother.
But my adoptive parents were, even with his bad traits, my dad was a good guy. My mom was a beautiful woman. And so, yeah, we grew, my mother always wanted me to find my birth mother. That was always her thing. I want you to find her. I want you to know who you are. So, yeah. So, I mean, we had a good relationship. We had a lot of rocky times. For the most part, I didn't have a bad childhood. I just had bad experiences.
So your adoptive mom, tried to take the place of your mom and your birth mother, and she gave you everything that your birth mother could not give you. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. How did you move on from there? And what was your relationship with your other siblings like?
As far as with my adoptive parents, I'm an only child.
Okay.
So I grew up by myself, which intensified or heightened the need for wanting to know who I was, because I grew up by myself. I mean, I had a lot of cousins and stuff, but those aren't siblings. As far as my biological siblings, we're off and on. I think it's hard for them to, even though I've known them for the last 22 years, at the end of the day, I think it's still hard for them to grasp that I exist. I mean, they call me. I have one sister. She's always trying to help me out, and she does help me out, and she's great. I have a brother who's always helping me out, but I think it's hard for them to, because they grew up together. They didn't grow up with me. Yeah. So it's hard for them to see me as a sibling. They see me as a sibling, but they don't see me as like
one of them.
Right, within their circle. Yeah. And I noticed that through time when certain instances would come up, like when my biological mother had a stroke, I found out on Facebook, and then it took me, I had to call them to find out. And then when she passed away a couple months ago, I found out on Facebook. I had to call them, stuff like that. So that stuff like that made me realize, like, I'm not one of them. I'm one of them, but I'm not one of them. Yeah. So the grand scheme of things, we have a good relationship. We have a good rapport. I know they love me, and I love them to death. So nieces and nephews, stuff like that. It's really crazy to hear somebody, hey, auntie, so like, it makes me feel good, so I love them to death. I just think that, it's just hard for everybody to be cohesive, or not even cohesive, to be a strong unit, because we didn't grow up as a unit, so.
Yeah, but one thing you have to realize is that sometimes people handle grief and bereavement in different ways. So, for instance, I can't actually explain why they had to leave you to find out about the death of your birth mother on Facebook, but possibly they just didn't know how to reach out. They just didn't know how to handle the grief. They were dealing with it their own way.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Well, and, I take that into account. Like, I'm not one of those people that don't give the benefit of the doubt or try not to understand a position. And I get it, because when my mother died, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to do anything. I pressed through. But even, at the end of the day, that feeling, the death of a parent, is something that there's nothing that compares to it, because your entire world is built around them having your foundation. And now once they pass, your entire world looks different. Ain't the same. Like, you realize that you don't have the support system that you thought you did growing up. because they're not your responsibility. You know, you're not their responsibility. You're a niece, you're a cousin, you're not their child. So they don't have to help you. They don't have to listen to you. They don't even have to answer the phone when you call. You know what I'm saying? So once my mother passed, I saw that it was really her. It was really my dad that were the ones that gave me that structure and gave me that love and support. Everybody else gave it to you, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't with the same intensity. It wasn't with the same amount of affection that, you know, that your parents give to you. So I can understand that. Like they had just found out, it had just happened. And for me to expect them to call me is kind of out of pocket. But at the same time, I guess because I was caught up in emotion, I felt like I should have got a phone call. But that's emotion that's speaking, not realism. You know, not me being realistic to the situation.
That's true. Yeah. Because I know when my parents passed away, some of my friends blamed me for not telling them. And I was like, I was in shock. I was dealing with something. I was dealing with grief. I was bereaved. I was like, I couldn't handle that. And then you are supposed to be the ones calling me, checking up on me.
Yes.
So you don't expect me to be calling the whole world, say, hey, friend, I just lost my mom. Hey, you there? I just lost, you know what I mean? Yeah. But so
I know exactly what you mean. I get it. You know, it's funny because my mother died. She died in 2017 from lung cancer suddenly. And then in 2018, my father got diagnosed with lung cancer and he died the next year. And so when my mother died, I couldn't be there for her because I was living in Atlanta and she was about 900 miles away. So I couldn't be there for her like I wanted to be. Yeah. So when my father got diagnosed, I took a leave from my job to come take care of him while he did chemotherapy and radiation. And he was great in the beginning. And then stuff started going downhill. And, you know, being a caretaker of anybody is difficult, but especially a parent. And then he just died about 4 months later. And what's crazy is that when he passed away, I had to, because I'm the only child, I had to put on a face of, I got this. I'm okay. There's no problem. You know, you can call me. I'll call you. You know what I mean? And it was just like you had to hold in everything because you didn't want to break down in front of anybody because you don't want it's going to be okay. You don't want that cliche stuff. You know, it's going to be okay. Time will heal it. He's in a better place. I don't want to hear that. You know what I mean? Because my mother's gone last year. My dad's gone now. Yeah. And I don't want to hear it's not going to be okay because now it's just me. I'm married. Yes, I have a child. And what's funny is my husband, he proposed to me right after my mother passed away. My dad gave him her ring that he bought for her. And he gave it to him to propose to me. And then the next year when he got sick and he was in the hospital, we just said we were planning a wedding in Atlanta. We're going to have this big thing. And we just said when he was in the hospital, he said, let's just do it. Because your dad is sick, let's get married. And we got married in my dad's hospital room. We surprised. So at least I had a parent there, you know. So it's crazy because like you said, you want people to call you, support you, help you, hold you up. And then sometimes people think that it's your responsibility to
reach out to them. Yeah. Which I find really upsetting sometimes.
But that's a new way of thinking because, you know, generations ago, not even generations, maybe like 2 generations ago, if somebody died, if the husband died, if the child died, if the parent died, everybody would come to your house with food. Everybody would come to your house to make sure you were okay. You didn't have to call them. You didn't have to ask them for anything. Your house would be bombarded with people, bombarded with food, bombarded with support. And nowadays, it's like you have to do all the work and reach out. And I don't know where the breakdown happened, but they don't do that no more. That mindset is so gone. And I don't understand where we went wrong and what generation dropped the ball, because it had to be the parents of the generation that dropped the ball. You know what I mean?
Yes, that's true. Yeah, I think it's about I think sometimes it's about religion, and I think sometimes it's just about people wanting to be in their own inner circle people wanting to be in a cocoon, not reaching out to others. So I don't know where it started and I don't know how it started, but as human beings, we are social beings and we don't survive very well in isolation. So we should be able to reach out to people when they're grieving, when they're celebrating. I understand COVID is on, but when all that is fixed, we should go back to the way things, we help out each other, we reach out to each other. And we show love and we display. That's the essence of humanity. As you say, it's something that I think needs to be fixed because it just doesn't really need to go on like that.
No, it doesn't. And it's sad because you have people out here who may not have people, or they may have people and don't know to the extent that they have their support. So they're not going to reach out. They're expecting these people to reach out to them, and then they feel alone. Because now these same people are the same people that are trying to wait for their phone call. You shouldn't, but it's just, we've dropped the ball in so many areas of life. This generation and the generation before me are a little different than what our parents or their parents were like.
So you talked about being in Atlanta. At what point did you move to Atlanta?
Well, I actually had moved to Atlanta in like 2001 for a few months, and it just wasn't my scene. It was my first time moving away from home. Forget just moving up the street or getting an apartment. I moved to Atlanta from Connecticut. So it was I didn't have a car. I didn't have steady jobs. It was 9/11. So it must have been 2001. Yeah. So it was 9/11 had happened. I was working at a hotel, so I lost all kinds of income. So I came back a few months later. After I come back, I'm dating, and I end up meeting this guy. Well, I didn't meet this guy. My uncle was dating a woman, and he had been dating her for 15, 16 years. I've been going over her house since I was little. I knew her kids, and her son. Never even paid him any attention. I was young. I wasn't paying him any attention. But once I moved back from Atlanta, the first time, he came to my house all of a sudden. I guess he saw me at a party and he knew where we lived at. So he came knocking on my door and he invited me to a party, and I went. And from there, we started a relationship, but we kept it quiet because my uncle was dating his mother.
Oh,
and
that's complicated.
Right. And we knew it was going to be a problem. And his mother and my mother were best friends.
Oh,
so we were like, don't say nothing. And eventually it got out. So then we didn't have to hide it anymore. But my mother was like, please don't date him. He has a history of beating on his baby's mother.
Oh, wow.
This, that, and the third. And my uncle was like, don't date him. I don't trust, I love him like a son, but I don't want you dating him. And I'm like, you know what? It's good. Don't worry about it. Boom, boom, boom. You know how we are. We, sometimes women think that they could.
You just feel like you're old enough to take your own decisions and you just want to fly.
So that's what I did. And so then we're dating a couple of months and things are okay. I can tell he was a little jealous and possessive, but it wasn't anything that was over the top, like something I couldn't deal with.
Why was he jealous?
You know what? I'm going to be honest. I'm not a man basher. I actually criticize women way more than I talk about the misgivings of men. Yeah. But most men, their ego fuels their personality as opposed to their ego being a complement of their personality.
Yes.
So what happens is like they put on this thing like, I'm very confident, I'm very this, I'm very that. When in actuality, because they know who they are, they know who their friends are, what they've done, how they've attracted women or gotten women to be in relationships with them. They know the tactics, the mental things that they do as men. And they look at women as weaker. So what happens is when they get a woman, because they know the tactics of men and they know what they've done and they've pulled you, for lack of a better term, they now feel like, well, I have to keep her in my grips because I know what I've done to get women. So they feel like we're so naive, we're so dumb, or we're so easy that if a man says hi, that the first thing we're going to do is pull our pants down and say, okay. So instead of thinking, you know what, she has a mind of her own, she's strong, she's not so quote unquote easy, or she's not one to lay down with every man that winks at her, looks at her, talks to her, says hi to her. So instead of thinking the best of us, they think the worst of the men and think that we're so naive that we fall for any game given. Yeah. So I think that's where the jealousy and the fear of women being nice to other men come in. Okay. You know what I mean? Because they know what they've done. And I was, so anyway, that's what it was. He was just, I don't want you talking to him. I'm like, I'm not going to, so in my head, being who I was, even though I've had confidence issues and daddy issues, there was no part of me that was going to be like, okay, I'm not going to talk to him. I was like, I'm not giving up my friends for you. I know them way before I even knew you. I'm not doing that. So it would be that. And a couple months in, we were sitting in his mom's house. We were watching Goodfellas. That's one of my favorite movies. And there's a scene in Goodfellas where the neighbor assaults the lady in the movie. Oh. And she called her boyfriend. And she's going, oh my God, he beat me up, he hit me. And so it was because he offered her a ride. So we're sitting there watching this scene, and my boyfriend is telling me, my ex-boyfriend, is telling me, don't you take no ride from no man. If I'm around, you don't take no ride. And if I'm not around, you just take the bus, or you walk. I said, excuse me, no. But if I've known somebody 20 years like that woman known that man, I am not going to say, no, I don't want to ride because I have a boyfriend that I just met 2 months ago. I'm not doing that. So we go back and forth, and he hits me. What? So I said, what? So I hit him back, and we're fighting in the room. And his mother busts open the door, and she says to me, like, I'm the culprit. She tells me to get out. And I understand, that's her son, that's her house, that's his room. I get it. Because he had just broken up with his girlfriend and he didn't have a place to stay. So he was staying with his mother briefly. So anyway, she told me to get out. Mind you, she was my mother's best friend. She had broken up with my uncle at this point, and she never told my mother. And I never told my mother because he just proved my mother right. He beat up on his baby's mother. So I was like, you know what? He saw me fight back. He's not going to try it again. About 3 weeks later, we were driving in a car. And he grabbed, while he was driving, I'm in the passenger seat. He took his hand, wrapped it around my neck, slammed my face against the passenger side window, and he just kept slamming my head on the window. Wow. Wow. And I said, what the hell is going on? And I'm scared. We're driving in traffic. People see this.
That must have been terrifying.
Man, it was. And so at that point, I was like, you know what? I can't. I'm scared now. Now you can still fear. Now, see, I always tell people when you're in an abusive relationship, people always say, well, it couldn't be me. Or how did you let that happen? First of all, a comment like that is blaming the person that was getting beat up. Because now you're telling them that it's their fault that they stayed. Yeah. Then you're telling them that you're smarter than them, that you wouldn't have stayed. But I always tell people that when a man is abusing you, he's not going to come out day one and be abusive. He's going to train you. He's going to, like a dog, he's going to train you like a dog. He's going to give you the best of who he is, make you fall in love with the best of who he is, of who he knows how to be, I should say. Yeah. And he's going to make you fall in love and make your spirit and your soul connect with the best of him. And then after that, once he knows he has you connected, then he instills upon you, he'll drop little nuggets like the jealousy and the possessiveness and all that stuff. He'll drop that and make you see what it is that's coming. But because you're so in awe of him, you're not thinking that it's going to be a thing. So then by the time it comes, you're trained. You know not to say anything. You know what not to do. You know not to fight. And they know that. So that's what that was. And it was just like, I endured 3 years of it. And so one day he beat me for 6 hours off and on. What? Stomped me in the head with his boots on, put a gun to my head, choked me with a belt, kept punching me in the face, pulled my hair out, and for 6 hours. And so
I must say, you are strong and you are resilient.
People say that to me all the time, but because of what I carry from what I've been through, I don't feel it. But everyone will tell me between the deaths of my parents and having gone through that and being adopted and all the other stuff in between. I thank you for that. I thank you. But it's not like I say, oh, I'm strong. I can take it.
No. When I'm talking about strength, it's not like physical strength. You have that inner strength from you that keeps you going when you just want to fight and keep going, and you're just wrestling. You just don't give up. Yes, I was reading this morning, I was reading somewhere, I think it was it just popped up on my Alexa, and it says like 40 about violence against women. And it said something about 46% of men who killed women, they had a known history of violence. 59% of cases involve coercive control, stalking, harassment, and physical, financial, emotional mistreatment. And 1/3 of women killed by men in domestic violence reported the cases to police. And most times the police don't do anything about it. They just class it as civil cases, which need to be sorted out between the couples. But at the end of the day, some of these women actually lose their lives to this violence, and that's not right. I'm actually happy that we are talking about this, because domestic violence cases have been on the rise since the lockdown started, just because I think people are just in each other's faces. Nobody's going out. Everybody's working from home. So the frustration is there. And then I think because debts are piling up, mortgages are there to be paid, people are being followed, and some are losing their jobs. So there's a lot of stress that is going on, and mental health is also suffering. So all these impacts on people in different ways, and they react differently. So emotional triggers are there. Something needs to be done right now. At the end of the day, some of them end up dying. You've come out of this relationship and you're still here. You're still talking.
It was crazy is because when I tell the story, I tell people it's like a Lifetime movie. Like, even after he did that for the 6 hours, what's crazy is at the end of that 6 hours.
6 hours. Oh, I mean, beating for 6 hours.
6 hours. I've never experienced like that. I didn't even cry. It was like he was punching me in the face like a man, and I didn't even cry. Wow. He was choking me, and I didn't cry. And then he was like, I should leave you. And I said, well, can you go? I was like, that's all I'm asking you. Just go. It's okay. And when I didn't beg him to stay, it was a thing. Like, it triggered him. Like, she's not begging me to stay. Like, what is that about? And even after that day, like the next day, he works at a college. And he was like, I can hide you in this college and nobody will find you. Wow. He punched me in my forehead to the point where I had a knot on my face. Like, it was really crazy. So anyway, even after all of that, I didn't leave because fear guides you. When you're in an abusive relationship, fear guides every decision you make. What you put on, how fast you drive, how slow you drive. I literally had to count 2 rings on my phone before I picked it up. If I picked it up on the first ring, he would have thought I was doing something that I was trying to hide. If I picked it up on the 3rd ring, he would have thought I was doing something that I couldn't get to him fast enough. So I always had to pick up the phone on the 2nd ring. If I went to the bathroom, I had to put the phone in my sock if I had a skirt on because I didn't want to miss the phone call. It was literally everything I made for breakfast, dinner, lunch, anything I said, everything was guided by fear because that's how the relationship was.
That's not the way to live. When you say you're in love with somebody and you just live in constant fear, you just don't feel free. It's not right.
Even after all of that, I was too scared to leave. And so then one day he just called me while I was at work. And it was over on MySpace page. This is when MySpace was dwindling down. And he said, you have a MySpace page? I told you not to be on MySpace. And he was cussing me out on the phone. And I called my mother. I said, I don't know what's causing me to tell you this right now. I said, but he's been beating me. And my mother said, I know. My mother said, I know he's been beating you, but I've been waiting for you to tell me.
Wow.
She said, I knew I couldn't say anything to you when I would bring up little stuff, not even him beating you, but the way that you would come over And if he said, come to my mother's house, leave your mom's house. She said the fact that you would do certain stuff like that and you stopped coming around the way you usually do. She said, because I wasn't living there with her, I was living with him. She said, I knew he was beating you, but I couldn't say anything. I had to wait for you to tell me. So called the domestic abuse hotline. And she said, I told her what was going on. And she said, what's your plan? I said, I'm going to go to my mom's house, get some clothes, and go stay at my biological mother's house, which is about a half hour away. And she said, are you going to go to work the next day? And I said, yes. She said, does he know where you work? I said, yes. She said, does he know where your mother lives? I said, yes. She said, so your plan is just to move locations, but keep the same routine. And I said, basically. She said, that's not going to work.
Yeah, because he knows where he can get to you.
Exactly. She said, I'm sorry to tell you. Now, mind you, I was in the midst of buying my stuff to go to my biological mother's house. And she said, I don't want you to think I'm telling you to stay in an abusive relationship, but I want you to know that you can't leave like this. You have to have a plan. So the best thing for you to do is go home with him and try to make sure everything is, do the best you can. If he says sit on the table, she said sit on the table. If he said sit in the car, sit in the car. She said, because you don't want to trigger anything, because anything will trigger him. She said, because if you leave now with no plan, you're putting everybody who's helping you in danger. You're putting your friends in danger, and you're putting yourself more than anything in danger. She said more women die.
Yeah.
They're leaving the relationship than they do while they're in it.
Yeah. That's exactly what I said with this thing that came up this morning. It said 1 in 3 women eventually died because their partners or their ex-partners stalked them and hunted them down after leaving.
Right. And I had a friend who works at a jail, a women's prison, and she said to me that she had so many women in prison who went to jail for killing their partner because their partner wanted to kill them after they left.
Oh, wow. That doesn't...
Right. So after I left, right after I went back home, I would sneak to a friend's house. And I said, I heard you're moving to Atlanta in a couple of weeks. Can I come with you? And she said, yeah, you can come with me. So I said, okay, I got to go. And I would run back home and all that kind of stuff. So it was one day she was like, I'm leaving tomorrow. I said, okay. So I told my family, I said, I'm ready to get my stuff out. So I knew his schedule back and forth. So for like the 2 weeks before I left, I made the arrangements that I needed to make. Let my job know. No, I didn't even let my job know. I couldn't because I didn't want anything to get out. So he went to work. My family, my mother, my mother, my father, my aunt, her boyfriend, my friend's boyfriend, and an uncle went to the house, and we packed up all our cars with the stuff we could fit in there. And we brought it back to my parents' home. And I packed my car up with stuff that I was going to take with me to Atlanta. And my father was like, you could go stay at a hotel tonight. You could leave your car here. And I said, no, because I've known him to bash him. I've heard stories of him bashing in women's cars. I said, I need my car for Atlanta. So my father said, we'll drive to a hotel and, about a half hour away. I had changed my phone number that fast. So he was calling me and it wasn't going through. So instead of, while we're on the highway, my dad is in front of me in his truck and he sticks his hand out the window with his phone, which to tell me to call him because I changed my number. He didn't have it. And I called him and he said, you can't go back home because he's over there. He's going crazy at the house.
Yeah.
You're going to have to stay at the hotel. So I stayed at the hotel. My friend came that night that I was leaving with, and we left for Atlanta the next morning. And I've been going 15 years.
Good on you. You did what you had to do, and you took all the actions that you needed to. That's really great. And you are alive today just because of that action. Who knows what could have happened? Great job. Well done.
I'm trying. I have a lot of wounds to heal, but, in the midst of it all, what? Me crying about it, me reliving it. There are moments when I have flashbacks of it and stuff like that, but it's not to the point where it deems me, with the inability to function. So, but yeah, it's a journey. And sometimes I don't even think about it for a long period of time. It doesn't even pop in my head.
Okay. So, where are you now with your life?
Right now, I'm married. I'm living back in Connecticut. Since my parents passed away, I own the house that they had. So my husband, he was married previous to me. So He has 3 children with his ex-wife, so he was willing to up and leave and come to Connecticut. His mom is in Atlanta, so we came back to Connecticut, and we're living here now. It's been a rough ride, but I'm a mother of a soon-to-be 10-year-old. She was 4 months premature, just like I was.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm actually allergic to being pregnant, which is super weird. When I was pregnant with her, I was close to 6 months, and my cervix started dilating, and they had to hospitalize me. And while I was hospitalized, I got what was called a saddle pulmonary embolism.
Oh, how about that? Pulmonary embolism, yeah.
Yeah, so mine went through both branches of my lungs and the center part. So I had little airway left. And I'm down there by myself, which at the time he was my boyfriend. And they kept saying, do you have anybody to call? And I said, oh, my boyfriend will be here tomorrow. They said, no, do you have anybody to call? I said, he'll be here tomorrow. And they kept saying it. And I said, do you think I'm going to die? And they said, we're going to try to not let that happen. And so I'd be in the hospital, and every day there would be like 30 or 40 people coming to see me. And I asked my nurse, I said, why do so many people come in my room? And she said, you don't understand. You're not supposed to be talking. You're not supposed to be alive. She said, the clock passed through your heart. She said, you told me one day you had a bad pain in your back. And I said, yeah. She said, that was the clock passing. You were supposed to die in that moment. And she said, you're here, you're watching TV, you're joking, you're making us laugh. She said, that's why everybody is here looking at you.
So because you're coming to look at the miracle girl.
Exactly. And the only thing that saved my life is my pride would not let me use the bathroom in a bedpan, because they told me, don't get up. And I couldn't let my pride let me use the bedpan. So I would take all the leads and wires out my arm and sneak to the bathroom. And I almost passed out 3 times. And that's when I said, something's not right. When I was laying down, I was fine. But when I walked, I would almost pass out because I had no oxygen.
Yeah.
So that's what made me say, oh, I have a little chest pain. And that's when they found it. But yeah, So she was 4 months premature. She was 15 ounces. Now she's about to be 10 years old. They told me she might have cerebral palsy, quadriplegic, paraplegic, anything. She came home with just a little bit of oxygen, no physical issues, and she's on the spectrum of autism, but she's on the low end of the spectrum. Other than that, she's perfectly fine.
Oh, that's great to know. Oh, I'm really happy for you, because you deserve a break from all this emotional abuse, and just having one little piece of happiness. That was what I was expecting. So I'm really glad that she's okay and she's doing well, even though she has tiny little bit of autism, but it doesn't sound like it's something that bothers her.
And like I always tell people too, like, I live my life with this. This is my mantra. This is my saying. Like, I don't have to agree with you to understand your position. And just because I understand your position doesn't mean I agree with it. So I always tell people, like, that's how you should live your life. Like, I don't have to, I can hear you, I can listen to you, you can listen to me. And that's how I try to be with friends, family, and that's what gets me through. And even in the worst of people, I can sometimes understand where they're coming from, how they got there. And that makes all the difference. If you could understand how a person got there, it might make you more merciful to who they are and what actions or words that they say to you that may hurt you or, go against you being a good person to them. It'll help you. And that's how I look at everything, even the worst of society. And people say that like it's cliche. Oh, like, I'm a good person. I see the good in everybody. It's not about seeing the good in everybody. It's about seeing the humanity, so, and that's how I try to live. And I believe that the universe brings it back to me in forms of goodness, I've had my trials, my issues. Shoot, I'm having one now. But at the end of the day, I know it'll work out. And it's because I know that even in the worst of everything, even in mud, there's some good nutrient. Even in a lie, you can only make a lie up if there's some truth in it. So everything has some goodness to it. So even through the worst issues that you're going through, there's something good in it, but it's up to you to pull it out, learn from it, and move on. Because if you keep failing a test, you're going to keep having to take that same test over and over again, and it's going to get harder and harder. That's how I try to do. And hopefully, like, you know, my daughter is the best thing out of everything that I've been through. She's the best thing that I've been able to be blessed with, her and my husband. People, a lot of times they'll have like a marriage and they'll have issues. But even through those issues, your love produced something.
Great.
Right.
Beautiful.
Right. And even if you don't have a child, your love is still tangible in a way. Because a lot of times people can see your love. They don't even have to know you're together. They can just see it with the way that you are with one another. The energy is like visible. So that's how I just try to make sure the universe, and I don't do it for that. You know, a lot of people will do things for the purpose of getting goodness back. If you do it with just the intent of being good and not looking for anything, you know, to reciprocate to you, then that's way better than doing something looking for, like, you know, accolades and claps and pats on the back. Just do it just to do it. And when you get it back, it'll be even bigger than if you were trying to do it to get seen.
Beautiful. That's a great way to look at life.
So I wonder, how did you meet your husband, really?
When I moved to Atlanta, about 6 months after I moved to Atlanta, I got a job, and he was one of the managers, and he was the one that actually showed me around the location. And he was flirting with me, but I took him as one of those guys that flirt with everybody, so I didn't take him seriously. And it was funny because he asked me out for lunch, and I just thought he wanted to go lunch and do Dutch. And I was broke as a joke, so I said, no, I don't want to go, because I didn't want to go and embarrass myself and didn't have the money to pay, because I never been actually asking me on a date. And so later on, as we got to know each other, he asked me out again, and we went out, and that was it.
Amazing.
And I always said that any man that buys me ice cream is the one, because I've never been who took me to buy an ice cream cone. And it might seem so low, like a bar set so low, but to me, it's just so innocent and nice. And, you know, so one day he said, let's go. I'm going to take you out. And I said, okay. So he took me to the ice cream place to get an ice cream cone. And I was like,
So through you, he knew what to do to get you.
Right. So we've been together about 13 years.
All right.
And been married going on 2 years.
So do you have any advice or a last word for anybody that is going through any of the issues that you went through?
As far as adoption, I mean, that particular subject is individual. Like, you know, it depends on what type of family you grew up with, the circumstances surrounding that. So really, when it comes to adoption, I really don't have many words. All I can think of is just I don't think a person needs to see their genealogical or genetic tree, their genealogy tree, in order for them to understand who they are. Because you make yourself. You know what I mean? Like your whoever raised you gives you that foundation, whether it be messed up, brutal, whatever. It's up to you to pull yourself out of that. Your situations, you don't have to allow what you've been through or any traumas to shape you and make you. You can actually break free of that. So in regards to that, like, but as far as like an abusive relationship, I always tell people, I talk more so to the people that know people in abusive relationships. And I tell them all the time, like, please, patience is a virtue when it comes to these folks. There are women who stay because they love the person, or they think they do. They really don't love the abuser. They love the person that they fell in love with before the abuse. And people have to realize that. And it's not because they like getting beat on. It's not because they like the fear. It's not because they want to die, but it's because they're constantly looking for the person they fell in love with, and they think that person will come back. The person comes back after the beating. That person comes back after the verbal. That person comes back after all of the abuse. Right when he's finished, he or she, they turn into the person you fell in love with, and that's what you wait for. And then you hope that person stays, and you think you can do something to make them stay longer. When in actuality, you can't. But you don't know that because you're constantly on this hope because you fell in love with a person.
Yeah.
And a lot of times fear, I don't know if people realize, like, when you're afraid, there's a chemical in your brain that touches every muscle in your body.
Mm-mm.
And your body responds to that. And it's actually a poison. So that's why sometimes people get stiff. They can't move.
Yeah, they're like paralyzed.
Right. So that fear, imagine living in fear 24 hours a day while you're at work, not even in the presence of the person that's abusing you, while you're at school, while you're at your family's house, while you're at their family's house, while you're at home. There's a constant level of fear. And when you know that the person is willing to beat you because you might have looked at them wrong, or you talked to somebody, or you didn't come home fast enough, or didn't answer the phone fast enough, or you talked back to them, imagine the anger and the actions that will be put forth if you walked out the door. When people say, well, you come stay with me, that's dangerous. How many people have we seen, women or men, where they've left and the person goes to that person's house and kills everybody in the house? So it's not about a place to stay. It's about a plan. It's about making sure you're safe, making sure they can't find you. And people think that it's just easy to walk out the door and go stay with somebody. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work like that. And to the women that are getting abused, there is nothing wrong with them. I always say, it's not your fault, no matter what anybody says. If anybody says that it couldn't be me, or wouldn't have been me, or I would have killed them, no, ma'am, they don't know. They think they know. They don't know. And it's not your fault. I don't care if you spit in their face. Not to say that I don't think somebody should respond, but we all know that there are things that, it's not your fault. And that fear, you have to use that fear as fuel to save your life. Use it as fuel to get to the next day. Because if you fear dying while you're there, or getting beat while you're there, imagine the freedom you'll feel when you finally walked away and they probably won't find you, if you go about it the right way, Yeah. So I always tell women, if you need somebody to talk to, I'm here. If you need somebody to email, I'm here. If you just want to scream on the phone and cry and not have me say one word, I'm here. I won't even get advice. I can just listen. If you just want somebody, I'll listen to you cry. Because a lot of women feel alone, like nobody will get them, or they'll start giving them judgmental advice, where the advice might be good, but it's coming from a judgmental point of view.
That's true. Thank you so much for that summary. And it wraps up everything that I've been thinking about. People are often paralyzed by fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear of what's going to happen, the fear of where they go, the fear of what people will say, especially when children are involved. How am I going to leave the children? Where am I going to take? What am I going to do? So that's what actually stops them from taking actions and these things.
So, I thank you for bringing me on. I really do. I like telling my story because it's a healing process. When you say it out loud, sometimes it makes you, and someone's actually interested. It makes you feel good. And I appreciate the invitation, and I appreciate your whole demeanor, your energy, your voice. You're beautiful. It's calming.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you as well. Do you have anybody you want to give a shout out to?
Yes, I'd like to say happy birthday, soon to be birthday, to my daughter.
Oh, Winter. When is the birthday?
Her birthday's Monday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, right.
What's she called?
She's Winter. Her name is Winter.
Happy birthday, Winter.
I know that's right. And I want to thank my husband. He's been very patient, and he's endured a lot over the last year, and I want to say thank you, and I apologize that he hasn't had to go on through that. Anything that I've contributed to that, I want to apologize for that. And I just want to thank him. He's a good man. A lot of men wouldn't do what he has done, leaving his children to come to a city he's never lived in and live in a place. So fix up a home that he didn't grow up in. So I want to thank him and tell him that I appreciate him and I love him for his support and his sacrifice. So that's that.
Oh, that's awesome. I really appreciate you actually saying thank you to him, because not a lot of men, he's a good man. Not a lot of men would abandon their family to just say, okay, I found another girl I'm really in love with. And people would say, Are you out of your mind? You're leaving your family, you're leaving your safety net, you're going somewhere you don't know. So he's taking that leap of faith and he's talked with you and he's helped you through your storm. So I really appreciate that.
I'm saying thank you very much on your behalf.
For support on domestic violence and domestic abuse, the National Domestic Abuse Helpline and web chat is open for anyone who needs support in recognizing abuse. It's for women and young people. And the number is 0808 2000 24/7.
A big thank you to all our listeners who have been sending us messages through the message link. I would like to thank everyone who has listened in so far and contributed to this podcast. Thank you so much. We couldn't have done anything without you. Keep listening, keep sharing, keep downloading, and keep liking. Thank you again.